दिलों में प्यार की खुशबू तो होठों पर दुआ रखना। दिलों में प्यार की खुशबू तो होठों पर दुआ रखना। ईमान में वक्त से एक रिश्ता इश्क वफा रखना। ईमान में वक्त से
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Friday Sermon for Kids. We have a very powerful and moving episode for you guys because of the content of Beloved Huzur's Friday Sermon this week. I'm never going to be able to do this alone. With me are two amazing panelists. This week, to my right is Monis, to his right is Waleed. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Jazakumullah for being here, guys. So, dear audience, Beloved Huzur, may Allah be his helper, presented the stories and narrations of certain Ahmadi Muslims who prove, even in this day and age, that they are ready to sacrifice for the sake of Islam.
गुज़श्ता दिनों अफ्रीका के बर आज़म के मुल्क बुर्किना फ़ासो में जो इश्क़ वफ़ा और इखलास और ईमान और यकीन से पुर अफराद जमात ने जो नमूना मजमूई तौर पर दिखाया है वो हैरत अंगेज़ है। अपनी मिसाल आप है।
So, dear audience, Beloved Huzur presented to us the details of the very tragic and sad incident that happened in the African nation of Burkina Faso. We're going to be discovering some of the incredible stories of bravery from these Ahmadi Muslims from the African nation. But before that, I come to my panelists who I'm sure have been able to cover this week's Huzur's khutbah and your newly learned points. You, Monis.
The new thing I learned from Beloved Huzur's Friday Sermon was that if someone sacrifices their life for the sake of Allah, then they're not considered dead and are still alive.
This week I learned that Huzur Ayyadahullah Ta'ala bin Aziz stated that the love, sincerity and loyalty shown by Ahmadis in Burkina Faso is astounding, and their example stands alone.
That is absolutely true, both of your points. But as our dear audience knows so well, we are not going to go a step further in this discussion before hearing all of your newly learned points. For that, we're going to go straight to Kids Take.
The terrorists asked, renounce your faith in the promised Messiah, but they said no, and one by one they were martyred.
The 9 Ahmadis from Burkina Faso are heroes.
Those who are martyred in the cause of Allah are not dead but living.
9 Ahmadis were killed in Africa.
God the Almighty has said regarding those who sacrifice their lives for the sake of God, that they are not dead, but they are still living.
Ahmadis have sacrificed their lives for over 100 years.
Jazakumullah ahsan al jaza. Dear audience, we love to hear you. So if you missed us this week, make sure to send in a video next week. Okay, time for our discussion.
So, Murabi Sahib, I wanted to know about the verse that Huzur Ayyadahullah Ta'ala bin Aziz recited in the beginning of the Friday sermon.
Yeah, I think those verses are very important for our talk.
And that would be absolutely correct, Monis, because Huzur recited verses from Surah Al-Baqarah, verses 155 to verses 157. Basically, in those verses, Allah Ta'ala tells the believers that say not of those that have been killed in the way of Allah. It means Allah saying you should not say this about people that were killed in Allah's way. They are dead. And then right after that, Allah clearly says what you should say about it, which is they are living. But Allah also adds to it, only you are not able to see this.
Wait, Murabi Sahib, what does that even mean? And how does that apply to the incident in Burkina Faso?
Well, let's go into the actual story that Huzur presented to us, which happened in the very small community of Mehdiabad in Burkina Faso. Huzur basically mentioned that it was at the time of Isha Namaz, so later at night, that when the Ahmadis there had gathered for Namaz, that 8 terrorists came on 4 different motorcycles. They came to the masjid there, and they didn't directly start attacking. What they did was they came in with their guns and then they started asking questions to all of the Ahmadis that were sitting there. And they received very powerful and complete answers to their questions. They separated all the elders, took all the elders out, and told the elders, it was 9 of them in total there, and told them that you should reject Islam Ahmadiyyat. You need to leave this faith, leave this Ahmadiyya Jamaat, and we'll let you go safe, right? Now, every single one of them was asked this question at face. Said, leave this Jamaat and we'll let you live. And every single one of these elders said that we are not leaving this Jamaat. We are going to stay in this Jamaat. This is the truth that we are ready to die for. And they accepted martyrdom.
Inna lillahi wa inna alayhi raji'un.
To Allah do we belong, and to Him we shall return.
When we see in our physical life a difficulty come upon us, Allah teaches us to say this, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, that it is to Allah that we were going to go anyway. It is simply that these people have gone ahead to Allah well before us and with a far higher rank. But it is to Allah that we are going to return. And so that is the line of thinking that true martyrs adopt. They accept this for themselves. They accept that it is only to Allah that they belong and it is only for Allah that they will live. And this brings to another very important story that Hazur mentioned. You guys have heard of Sahibzada Abdul Latif Shaheed, raziyallahu anhu?
Wait, that's the famous companion of the promised Messiah, alayhi salam, from Afghanistan, right?
Oh yeah, I've heard of him. He was a very respected saint with thousands of followers. But right after accepting Islam Ahmadiyyat, he was martyred by his own government.
Exactly, Wali. Both of you guys are correct. Hazur mentioned that the promised Messiah in a very famous book of his, the book is called Tazkirat al-Shahadatain. In that book, the promised Messiah spoke of Shahzada Sahib. And he described how the sacrifice of Shahzada Abdul Latif Sahib was astounding. In that book, the promised Messiah had said that in the future, in the growth and the progress of the Jamaat, there would be other people that would come who would be the Qaim Muqam of Shahzada Sahib.
Murabbi Sahib, I wish I could appreciate how large this point is. But that was a pretty big word you said there.
Yeah. What does it mean to be a Qaim Muqam?
Well, for that discovery, we are going to obviously have to go over to our incredible presenter, Atar, who is going to take it away with the word of the sermon.
Jazakallah, Murabbi Sahib. As you may have guessed with Qaim Muqam, we have another compound of the Urdu language today. That means 2 words coming together. The word Qaim means standing or established. The word Muqam means in his place. When you combine the two, you get standing in one's place. Simply put, it means a person who has followed someone's steps so closely, they're almost the same as them, or a type of representative of that person. Hazur explained how the martyrs in Mehdiabad, Burkina Faso, because of their devotion and purity of belief in Islam Ahmadiyyat, had become the Qaim Muqam of Shahzada Sahib Rizqallah Anhu, a title they did justice to with their lives. Back to you guys.
Jazakallah Ahsan al-Jazaa. You are absolutely right. The sacrifice of these members of the Jamaat in Burkina Faso was incredible. And that started from the very day they accepted Islam Ahmadiyyat.
But Murabbi Sahib, didn't Hazur mention each one of the martyrs?
Yeah, so Murabbi Sahib, can we talk about the Imam Masjid? Hazur Ayyadahullah Ta'ala bin Aziz mentioned some wonderful things about him.
That is absolutely correct. Hazur did go into the details of all of the individuals. And foremost, Hazur mentioned, was the Imam of this Masjid in Mehdiabad. That was Imam Al-Hajj Ibrahim Bidiga Sahib. Hazur mentioned that he was not just an ordinary person who would just come to the masjid. He, before accepting Islam Ahmadiyyat, was one of the most respected Wahhabi Imams. He used to have thousands of people that he's taught in Burkina Faso, and his students used to come even from outside the country. So he wasn't just like an ordinary person, right? But after doing his own personal research, finding out about the Jamaat and the Jamaat's teachings, he converted to the Jamaat over 20 years ago. Right after him, Hazur mentioned of another individual. That was Manyal Al-Hassan Sahib. And Al-Hassan Sahib was again not an ordinary individual. He was one of the oldest people there at the masjid, one of the prime helpers of Imam Ibrahim in his work when he would go and do tabligh in different regions, right? And Hazur mentioned that Al-Hassan Sahib, sometimes we end up thinking that these people are just simple, and they're just living in Africa. He knew 5 languages. He used to speak 5 languages, different regional languages, and he used to go and preach the message of Islam Ahmadiyyat in 5 different languages. How many languages do you know, right? So that gives you an idea of how incredible these people were. It's like Allah had chosen them to become martyrs on that day, on that evening.
Honestly, no amount of talking can do justice to their pious lives.
Yeah, the example they set for us is just extraordinary. But Murabbi Sahib, how can we act as a result of this profound incident?
I think, Waleed, there are many answers to that question. But one particular answer is something we're going to have to discover by going to our next segment, for which we take our audience straight to the question of the sermon. All right, everyone, welcome once more to this segment that we call the question of the sermon. You sitting at home as well as our 2 panelists will have 10 seconds to get the right or to find the right answer for a weekly question. The question this week is, what is the particular type of fund in the Jamaat which takes care of the families of martyrs in our Jamaat? So you know, families, they've lost elders, they need to be taken care of, right? Their children, wives, so on. What fund is that? You have 4 options. Option number 1, the Chanda Vasiyat. Option number 2, the Chanda-e-Aam. Option number 3, the Fund of the Martyrs. And option number 4, the Sayyidina Bilal Fund. Time starts now. And time's up. Monis, what do you have?
I think it's number 4.
And Waleed?
I also think it's number 4, the Sayyidina Bilal Fund.
Your answers are absolutely correct.
Alhamdulillah.
So, Murabbi Sahib, what else did Hazur mention?
Well, Hazur mentioned that, you know, the Markaz, that is Jamaat Ahmadiyya, is going to do everything that it can in order to take care of the families, the children of these martyrs, right, that they've left behind. They're not in this world anymore. So somebody has to take care of their young children. And so Hazur said that the Jamaat will do everything that it can, but it is also the responsibility of Ahmadis around the world to contribute and pay to the Sayyidina Bilal Fund, so that those donations can then be used to take care of those martyrs. But at the same time, Hazur mentioned something very beautiful. Hazur said that these Ahmadis in Burkina Faso are the shining stars of Ahmadiyyat. That's what he called them. Hazur called them the shining stars of our Jamaat. Now, what is a shining star? It is something that should teach us. It should be an example for us. And so that is something for us to derive inspiration from. We shouldn't just become weak and sad over this. We should be inspired by their example of bravery and let that example live in our lives. And that is how we need to react as a result of this.
But Murabbi Sahib, we simply cannot go ahead without mentioning the remaining Ahmadi martyrs.
I absolutely agree. If Hazur gave mention to these shining stars of Ahmadiyyat, we absolutely should talk about them. So Hazur mentioned the remaining members. There was the name of Mali al-Usaini Sahib, and Hazur mentioned about his person that everyone knew that he was an individual regular in the Tahajjud namaz. You know, we sometimes do it just at Ijtima. This was a person that used to do it every single day. This is the kind of person he was. Then there's the example of Hamidu Abdur Rahman Sahib, who was the next martyr. Hazur said that he was an individual who had taught his family, despite their difficult state in Africa, to stay connected with the Jamaat, and he would bring his family over to the masjid. Then after that, Hazur mentioned the name of Mukarram Ibrahim Sule Sahib. Ibrahim Sule Sahib was an individual who, despite his very poor place in Africa, was very regular in his financial donations. So this is not easy, right? We're living a super easy life over here. We don't have to worry about anything. So giving chanda should be pretty easy for us. But they over there were living a pretty difficult and simple life. And despite that, Ibrahim Sahib would make sure that he gives donation. Then after that, Hazur mentioned the example of Sudeye Usmane Sahib. And Usmane Sahib, Hazur mentioned, he was one of the individuals that had helped in the physical construction of the Mahdi Abad Masjid, where this incident happened. So he also was very dedicated and passionate, a person that had helped build the actual masjid. Then after that, Hazur mentioned amongst the martyrs was Mukarram Maguel Agali Sahib. And Agali Sahib was, Hazur mentioned, from what all the people have said, he was one of the most regular people in coming to namaz there at the masjid. That's why he was at the Isha namaz so late, at the masjid offering it. And the other person Hazur mentioned, Idrahi Musa Sahib. Idrahi Musa Sahib, Hazur mentioned, was an individual that people said used to spend long hours in the masjid. He used to be there constantly in the remembrance of Allah. And aside from that, despite whatever he could write, Hazur said he was one of the people that used to write letters to me. I remember the letters that he used to write to me as well. He was connected.
Subhanallah. But Murabi Sahib, you still haven't mentioned one more person.
You are absolutely right, Walid. Because the final person Hazur mentioned was also the youngest from amongst these people. So they had taken all of the elders, right? And amongst the elders, he was the youngest. He was in his early 40s, right? And the terrorist came to him. This was, of course, Aguma Sahib. And the terrorist came to him and told him that you're still young. You have a life ahead of you to live right now. Just get out of this Jamaat, leave this Jamaat, and go ahead and live your life. And he stood firmly there and he said, just like my elders gave their life, I am ready to give my life for this Jamaat. And so he was ready, standing there, and that's when they martyred him. But he accepted martyrdom. May Allah Ta'ala elevate all of these martyrs' status and protect and strengthen the families that they have left behind.
Ameen.
Well, my dear panelists, I wish I could continue talking about this because the details are not only incredibly moving, but at the same time very, very inspiring. But as time dictates, we have come to that time of our episode. So will you take it away?
Got you, Murabi Sahib. Remember everyone, watch the full khutbah.
And make sure to get back to us with the old critical message.
Did you enjoy this week's Friday Sermon for Kids? Want to know how you can make it even better? Tell us what you learned from beloved Hazur's Friday Sermon and send your videos at fsforkids@mta.tv no later than every Sunday, and we'll try our best to include them in our next show.
Now, we can't include all the videos you guys sent to us. So you guys can visit our Instagram and Twitter at MTA Canada and see all the videos you guys sent to us. Remember, at Friday Sermon for Kids, you're not just the audience, you make the show.
Okay, everyone, it's time once more for our little review of our lesson this week. As always, pay close attention.
Beloved Hazur started this sermon by going into the details of the tragic incident in Mehdi Abad, Burkina Faso, where 9 innocent and incredibly devoted souls of Islami Ahmadiyyat were martyred at the hands of terrorists. The terrorists came to the Ahmadiyya Muslim Masjid at Isha, separated the elders and interrogated them one by one, asking them to leave Islam, Ahmadiyyat. But every one of them rejected the terrorists' demands and embraced martyrdom for Islami Ahmadiyyat. Hazur gave a detailed account of these devoted souls, calling them Qaim Muqam, of the martyrdom of the famous companion of the promised Messiah alayhi salatu wasalam, named Sahibzada Abdul Latif Shaheed Raziyallahu Anhu.
Foremost among the blessed martyrs of Burkina Faso was Al-Hajj Imam Ibrahim Bidiga, who converted to Islam Ahmadiyya from the Wahhabi sect. His devotion for spreading Islam Ahmadiyyat was so incredible, he even offered people access to phone plans so they could do tabligh. Then was Maniyal Al-Hassan Sahib, who knew 5 regional languages and regularly accompanied Imam Ibrahim for tabligh. Hazur advised members of the Jamaat to contribute to the Sayyidina Bilal Fund so families of these martyrs could be looked after.
The qualities of the martyrs were very lofty. There was Ali al-Usaini Sahib, a man regular in his tahajjud namaz. Then was Hamidu Abdur Rahman Sahib, who always kept his family strongly connected to the Jamaat. Ibrahim Sule Sahib, who despite the poor conditions of life, always was ready to give donations to the Jamaat. And there was Sudai Usmane Sahib, who had helped build the very masjid in Mehdiabad where this incident happened. Maguel Agali Sahib, a man constant in his prayer and donations, and Idrahi Musa Sahib, who would spend long hours remembering Allah at the masjid. And finally, but certainly not the least, Abdur Rahmane Aguma Sahib, who, being the youngest amongst the elders, when pressured to leave Ahmadiyyat and live his life freely, rejected the terrorist demands and wholly accepted martyrdom, becoming the 9th and final martyr at Mahdiabad. May Allah elevate the status of all of these martyrs of Islam Ahmadiyyat.
Ameen.
And obviously, don't forget
to make sure to watch Hazur's full khutbah.
And until next week,
Khuda Hafiz.
एक रिश्ता इश्क वफा रखना, दिलों में प्यार की खुशबू तो होठों पर दुआ रखना, इमाम वक्त से एक रिश्ता इश्क वफा रखना, इमाम वक्त से एक रिश्ता इश्क वफा रखना।